In this small village surrounded by rolling hills and farmland, Daniel had a reputation for one thing. He had a special ability to communicate with the dogs. Daniel had a modest reputation as a trainer, and someone who truly understood shattered souls after more than 20 years of working with aggressive and traumatized animals, primarily German shepherds. No longer did Daniel embark on his assignments alone. For the past few years, Lily, his daughter, had accompanied him on his travels whenever she could. She was 10 years old, full of wonder, sweet, and incredibly bright. Due to her mother's untimely death, Lily was born into a family of dogs rather than human siblings. She found comfort, language, and meaning in her interactions with animals. Neither of them could have imagined how one chained dog would alter the course of their lives irrevocably that morning as they stuffed their final possessions into Daniel's weathered knapsack. As Daniel was wrapping up his session with a rescued Labrador right before noon, his phone started buzzing. Carla was a caseworker from the neighborhood animal shelter who stood at the opposite end of the queue. She spared no words when she spoke. "Dan, we're in trouble." Her voice, she claimed, was constricted. The German Shepherd goes by the name Shadow. A person's backyard has been his home for the majority of his existence. His owners abandoned him when they relocated. Near him, nobody has dared to venture. Daniel's pupils shrank. Is he furious? Oh no, he's crossed a queue. Police attempted to intervene, but he nearly shattered the fence. Fear grips the neighborhood. Your presence is essential. Lily sat on a seat nearby, writing in her notebook, as Daniel glanced across at her. A sluggish nod came from him, and he spoke. "I'll come, but my truck is still in the shop." "No problem," Carlo responded. "I'll have Dr. Garcia come get you." An hour after that, a vehicle belonging to a veterinarian drove into Daniel's driveway. Without hesitation, Lily dove in. Dozens of times before, she had done this, but whenever aggressiveness was involved, a subtle tension would linger. As they rode in the van down the dusty county roads, Dr. Garcia gave them all the information they needed. The shadows were long, narrow, and powerful. Eventually, the chains corroded into the ground. People had been tossing food over the fence for over a year. During that time, nobody had ever touched him. With a nervous grin, Lily chewed on her lip. Daniel took a while to respond to my question about why someone would abandon a puppy in such a state. As he peered out the window, a mental image of all the lonely canines he had seen hurtled through his mind. "Because some people just have no idea how terrible a chain can be," was his final response. "Not everyone is concerned." Gesturing towards him, Lily firmly stated, "Let's go show him that someone does." Despite its location on the edge of a dwindling field, the house gave the impression of being deserted. The gate creaked open as Dr. Garcia pushed it open, and the pungent odors of rust, urine, and spoiled food hit them immediately.
The subsequent noise and ear-piercing screech that sounded like gunshots echoing through the atmosphere shadow compared to Daniel's expectations. He was rather large. There was a massive German shepherd with a matted coat and a restless eye. He sprang towards the chains and with a terrifying burst of energy, his fangs flashing like daggers. The metal chains strained beneath Shadow's weight, digging into the earth and tightening every few seconds as he flung himself at the intruders. In an instant, Lily drew close to her father, grabbing the back of his coat with her little fingers. She said, "It appears as though he intends to harm us." Daniel remained silent. He was engrossed in observing the dog's every motion. Despite his years of training, Daniel felt a tightening in his chest as something sudden and terrifying happened, encased in muscle. This was desperate, not just angry. A worried-looking property owner stood distantly, arms folded. No one had been able to get close to him for more than a year. Leaving food behind, and leaving was his strategy, he explained. When I attempted to pet him before, he nearly bit me. To make a simple adjustment to the chain, I had to poison his food. Every time he encounters an aggressive dog, Daniel takes a strip of boiled chicken out of his backpack and carefully removes it. Gentlest motion toward Shadow, he tossed it. The canine paid it no mind at all. Daniel, whose barking was so intense that it shattered his voice, had his attention fixed squarely on him. As soon as they turned around to face the gate again, the barking ceased for an instant. Shadow swiftly dove forward, snatched the chicken, and returned to his guard position, his gaze fixed on the enemy. With a whisper, Lily said, "He doesn't hate us," drawing her father closer as she embraced him. "He simply doesn't believe in our existence." Daniel nodded after staring at her in disbelief. He knelt down, his voice low, and just out of Shadow's grasp. He did not issue commands, but conversed with others in a low voice. There must be some way to calm a scared child who is hiding under a bed, but all you said just made them madder. The barking of Shadow persisted. It sounded scared and unprocessed, as if he were attempting to scream his fears into the air. It was as if he couldn't know how to live without being prepared to battle. His body trembled not from fear, but from a more profound, frantic intensity. Plans were revised by Daniel. Gently settling into the dirt, he shifted his weight away from the dog and placed his hands on his knees. The ceasefire in barking was a manifestation of confidence that I am not here to fight. Just enough, albeit not much, resuming a quieter, less frantic pitch, the growls returned. From behind him, kneeling by the fence, silent and still, Lily observed. In the grass, she dropped her sketch pad. She proceeded to ask, "Why is he so scared?" Daniel was slow to respond. As he saw Shadow's eyes waver with uncertainty with each blink, he took a long breath. His experiences had taught him to be, "I wasn't born mad," he claimed. For some reason, he had the impression that nobody is safe. Shadow leaped forward once more in a flash. Under the stress, Daniel's teeth shattered within an inch of his boot, causing the chain to creak. He strained his neck to free himself from the collar. Daniel refused to budge. "He's not attempting to bite," he whispered to himself lightly. "He's trying to stay alive." Another yelp from the canine. Even if it was more of a caution than an actual threat, Daniel nevertheless noticed it. An ear that trembled slightly as he whispered for a moment. The growling ceased as Lily's words echoed across the room. Indications so small that they were hardly apparent, but to Daniel, they were crucial. There was life within this dog. Some aspect that hadn't completely collapsed as the sun dipped below the horizon. It cast lovely, lengthy shadows on the thick grass. Daniel did not budge from his seat. He remained motionless, his legs aching. For this type of job, standing still counted as advancement. Sitting quietly was. This game was second nature to him. It was more important to demonstrate with each breath that he would not harm you than to assert his dominance. In his shadow, Lily had taken a seat. She stood there, still, and watched. Her calm demeanor was like a refreshing breeze in a crowded room. She instantly put everyone at ease. With his gaze flitting between the two people, Shadow wandered about in a limited area. Although he snarled less today, the snarling was still there. A distant, persistent rumble, like thunder that is itching to erupt every few minutes. Daniel would advance his hand an inch into the dirt or step closer by half a step. Nothing surprising or terrifying. Schwer looked away from him for 20 minutes when he froze. His gaze is fixed on your palms. "Hey," Lily whispered. Presumably, he is patiently anticipating your next move. Daniel maintained eye contact while nodding. That's how people treated him in the past. The wind's movement of the parched grass was the sole sound breaking the prolonged stillness. After that, Shadow ceased to move about. While his tail remained tucked, the stiffness caused by fear had dissipated. A line was made as Daniel delicately dipped his fingertips into the dirt. Instead of lunging or growling, Shadow simply gazed. However, Daniel refrained from rejoicing. The minute shifts, or micro-movements, of trust was weak. If you pushed too hard, the wall would crash shut again. He took another piece of chicken out of his bag and put it just outside the circle of chain length. Shadow didn't come closer, not yet, but he didn't back away either. For Daniel, that meant everything. The sky changed from amber to purple as the sun slowly set. Hours had passed, and Shadow was still a statue of tension and warning. Daniel's knees hurt, his throat was parched, and his spirit fluctuated between patience and mistrust. He looked at Lily. She was still sitting there, holding her knees to her breast, and without saying anything. She hadn't spoken anything in a while, but her eyes were always on Shadow. Then she broke the silence with a soft, "Dad," she murmured. "Can I try?" Daniel squinted in surprise when he heard. "Try what?" "Helping him," she said. He turned to her completely, and there was worry in his eyes. "Lily, this isn't like the other dogs. Shadow is still in survival mode. One wrong move, and I won't move wrong," she whispered softly, her voice steady. "I won't move at all if he doesn't want me to. I simply want him to know I'm here." Daniel thought about it for a moment, but there was something in her face that told him this wasn't just youthful bravery. It was something deeper, a knowing. He nodded once and said, "Okay, stay behind the chains. Don't make any sudden moves." Lily smiled a little, then reached into her jacket pocket and drew out a small, crumpled bag of cookies shaped like animals. She took one out and crawled slowly on her hands and knees to a location closer to the edge of the fence without saying a word. Shadow's ears perked up and his eyes were fixed on her. She didn't look at him. Instead, she carefully put the cookie on the grass, stepped back slowly and quietly, and waited. For a long time, nothing happened. Then, like a ripple breaking still water, Shadow moved forward one step, then another. His body's tail curled between his legs, but his nose twitched as he smelt the cookie. He didn't growl or run away. He just stood there chewing slowly and watching the girl. Lily sat cross-legged with her hands in her lap and said, optionally, "Hi, my name's Lily." Shadow didn't bark or say anything, but for the first time that day, his ears slanted forward, not in anger, but in curiosity. Daniel felt something constrict in his throat. She had reached him. His experience had failed, but her gentle heart had opened a door. The garden was getting darker, and the last light of sunset was slipping away at the edge of the sky. The world had become peaceful. There were no barking or snarling, only the soft sound of wind and the steady breathing of a dog that had finally stopped fighting the air. Shadow sat by the chain post, looking back and forth between Daniel and Lily. He seemed exhausted, not physically, but like something inside him had let go. Not calm yet, but not at war either. Lily leaned towards her father and said, "He's ready." Daniel looked at the dog closely, then cautiously reached under his jacket and brought out a special catch pull, soft and padded so it wouldn't hurt. It was the kind of instrument that, if handled with care, would be unnoticeable. He might run or bite. Daniel primarily talked to himself, but Lily nodded her head. "He trusts us a little," Daniel remarked as he carefully proceeded towards the post where the chain was connected to the ground. Every few steps, he stopped, and Shadow's eyes followed him, but his body didn't tense up. Daniel knelt down and gently started to remove the rusty metal when he got to the bolt. His hands were steady and his breath was shallow. Then click the bolt came loose, the chain broke and fell to the ground with a loud clatter. Shadow leaped, but he didn't run or lunge. He just stayed there, transfixed, looking at the spot where the chain had been. His body shook and his eyes were wide. He stared down at his own neck, perplexed by the lack of weight. Then he took one shaky step forward, then another. "You're free, Shadow," Lily said through her tears. He believed it for the first time in years. The chain was curled up in the dirt like a snake that had died. Shadow didn't move for a long time. He remained there utterly still, as if his body didn't accept what had happened. Daniel slowly backed away to give him room. Lily stayed in the same spot with her hands in her lap and said nothing. She didn't have to. Her presence had already said all. Then, slowly and carefully, Shadow lifted one paw and went forward. The action seemed strange and hesitant, like a prisoner stepping out of a cell after being in the dark for years. He turned his head and his ears twitched at every sound, but he was no longer in a panic. There was something else now. Awareness and curiosity as Shadow smelt the air and took a few more steps away from the post that had defined Daniel's world for so long. He held his breath. Lily smiled kindly. He's getting better at walking again. It wasn't his legs that were the problem. Shadow had been going in circles for so long that straight lines felt strange. Freedom felt suspicious, but with each step, his spine straightened and his shoulders relaxed. Dr. Garcia opened the back of the van and set down a soft blanket and bowl of water. "Let's see if he'll come with us," she said softly. Daniel gave Lily a nod and said, "Want to try?" Lily got up and took a few careful steps towards the van, pausing halfway. She bent down and reached out her hand, not to touch but to offer. For a long time, Shadow just stared at her. He then proceeded gently and carefully towards the girl without being told to. He didn't recoil or snarl. He got near enough to sniff her palm. Then he did something that made Daniel's eyes hurt from disbelief. He leaned in for a brief moment. His forehead touched Lily's fingers. She didn't budge, she didn't say anything, but her eyes conveyed everything. They all walked to the van together. Shadow got in by himself. Inside, he curled up, not in a tight ball of terror, but loosely, as if he finally understood that this wasn't another trap. Daniel didn't take him to the shelter that night. Instead, he drove home, parked discreetly in the driveway, and let Shadow sleep by the hearth, where he was safe and free of chains. It wasn't the end of a rescue. It was the start of something neither of them had seen coming. Hope weeks went by. Shadow, now just Hope, as Lily had lovingly christened him, looked almost like a different person. The wild animal that had been caged up was now a peaceful, attentive friend who followed Lily around like a different type of shadow. Daniel, who was quiet and gentle, often watched them in the garden. Lily read on the porch as Hope dozed next to her, his head resting on her foot. He still had moments of doubt, such when someone raised their hand too rapidly or made a loud noise, but they went away faster now. He was beginning to have faith in the world again. Daniel told the story at every workshop and training session he delivered. He would add that chains aren't necessarily made of metal. Sometimes they're built of fear of suffering or memories that are too loud to forget. He exhibited pictures of Hope before and after. The growling, lunging hound was barely held back by rusting steel, while the placid shepherd was cuddled up next to Lily with her eyes closed and breathing softly. A lot of people in the audience didn't think it was the same animal. No fancy tricks, no drugs, no forcing someone to submit. Just time and a small girl who wouldn't give up. He stopped a lot when telling that section. Billy had taught him something that no book could, not out of drama, but out of respect. Sometimes the first step to mending isn't training. It's being calm, being present, and loving someone without expecting anything in return. Daniel remembers Hope's eyes every time he sees a puppy chained up in a yard. He knows that even when everything seems damaged, there is always something worth rescuing, especially when love doesn't want to give up.